political and legal experts. And Laura, could the president's tweets potentially result in some legal problems for the president?
Absolutely. And you have to wonder why he did not anticipate this self-inflicted wound actually bleeding out. Remember, he's been warned for time about the idea of every single word he says matter, not just in the court of public opinion, but in the court of law. It speaks to his actual mental intent of things. There's nowhere else you can get information about what the president is thinking directly other than from his own mouth. So when he tweets things that are, part of what he's actually thinking, and he relays that in black and white for the world to see, how can Mueller's team not look at it? They'd be reluctant if they didn't do that.
What about the president's threat to rescind security clearances for top national security intelligence officials from the Obama administration? Could that be seen potentially as witness tampering, witness intimidation? Because some of those individuals could be called as witnesses.
It could possibly, in terms of trying to use the media, social media in this capacity, as a vehicle to intimidate. Now, there's a little bit more of a tangential relationship than actually saying to the person directly, do not speak at any grand jury hearing, don't give any information. But because you've got this kind of go-around working out, and it's been a consistent pattern, I suspect Mueller's looking at it to say, well, what are you trying to accomplish by talking to the media or social media? Are you trying to undermine their ability to speak? If you are, that all goes to support their claim of his mental state of intentionally trying to undermine the investigation.
It's a hard case to make, though.
It is,
because you have to kind of piece it together like a mosaic and just say that, he was trying to intimidate a witness publicly, maybe?
Well, that's the problem with all of the intent-based claims. Intent is so difficult to find. You usually have circumstantial evidence of it, or you have the smoking gun as a confession. Here you don't have it. You have more of a combination. But still, the underlying claims, intent is only part of the elements to prove the crimes. And so he could have that to support it. If he has other things that show there was no other mechanism or no other basis for doing so, it's a bit of an easier case, but you're right.
Yeah. Gloria, what jumps out at me is that Rudy Giuliani, the president's lawyer, has suggested the president might be willing to sit down with Mueller and talk about the collusion allegation during the campaign, but doesn't want to talk at all about obstruction of justice, which is supposedly could have happened after he became president.
Look, I think the president's legal team is looking at this sort of in two parts. And one is pre-inauguration, where they really can't claim any privilege because he wasn't president. And that would involve collusion, because that would involve the collusion with the alleged collusion with the Russians. Obstruction is an issue that would come after the president was elected. And that's a very complicated matter, because he can claim privilege on certain conversations, say that he had with James Comey, or that he had with Jeff Sessions, or that he had with General Flynn. And so I think it's easier for them to say, let's just do one part and maybe do the other part in writing or not at all. And by the way, Wolf, our reporting is that right now they're nowhere. Okay, this is kind of frozen.
Not happening.
Not happening now. Right, exactly.
Giuliani also says obstruction of justice is done, in his words, quietly and secretly, not in public. Twitter, of course, is very public. What do you make of that defense?
Sure, possible, but I don't think that the fact that Donald Trump tweeted and that Robert Mueller's looking at the tweets mean that it can't be obstruction of justice. I mean, of course you can obstruct justice publicly. And most people probably do it privately, but I keep going back to what Laura said and what people often tell me, which is never tweet. Donald Trump would have been better off, and I'm sure got the guidance to scale it back, change his Twitter presence from the campaign and prior. He never did that. And so as a result, you have this long running record of what he thinks in the moment. And do I think that proves obstruction? No, but I also don't think you rule it out because it happens to be public. Donald Trump does lots of things that my guess is his legal advisors tell him not to. And that doesn't mean that he's not guilty. It doesn't mean he's guilty either.
And by the way, notice that Rudy Giuliani, for the second sort of case and defense in a row, is not talking about the substance of the issue. It's about the form of it. Well, it was cash versus check, not whether there was an overall obstruction to pay somebody. And now it's a discussion of, oh, no. It was in broad daylight, not denying the underlying substance of the claim. And I think the prosecutor is looking at this to say, well, are you going to actually attack the meat of the matter or talk about the sauce?
Well, remember the travel ban, the president's tweets were used against him by one court.
And Sean Spicer said very publicly in June 2017, the president's tweets are official White House statements. Press pressed him on that.
Deanna, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say it speaks to a larger issue beyond just the Mueller probe. Think about Mike Pompeo before the Senate Foreign Relations Committee yesterday, sort of getting tongue-tied, trying to explain what the president says isn't necessarily policy. You have to focus on what our policy, and that's not necessarily what the president says. And then he backtracks and says, oh, yes, what the president says is policy. I mean, the same applies to his tweets. You can go back constantly and read the president's tweets, and they completely contradict what official U.S. policy is. And this seems to be their go-to response among his administration. And whether it's the Secretary of State, whether it's Bolton, what they come out with is they say, well, this is not U.S. policy. And we're in a really unusual situation where you have the president not necessarily speaking parallel with what the policy is.
And on this issue, Bianna, the president's legal and political advisors may be suggesting to him cut back the tweets a little bit. It could potentially get you in some sort of legal trouble. I don't anticipate, I wonder if you do, any serious change on the part of the president's Twitter habits.
If he hasn't done it by now, Wolf, I mean, I wouldn't be holding my breath, would you?
No, I'm not holding my breath for that either. We wake up in the morning, we wonder how many tweets are going to be coming forward, and usually several of them each day. Let's turn, Laura, to another important development that's unfolding. A federal judge has just ruled that the lawsuit alleging that the President of the United States, that his business interests violate potentially the U.S. Constitution, and this lawsuit is going forward. There are enormous potential ramifications for the president.
There are, and this is one of the very first times we've ever had to test the emoluments clause. Now, what the court largely said is, the Trump administration wanted to have a very narrow definition of what it meant to get something from a foreign government. It meant a gift, almost a tangible object. Well, the other AGs involved said, listen, no, it meant advantage. It was far more expansive to try to guard against corruption and trying to pad your pockets literally and figuratively. So the court looked at it and said, in terms of a foreign government, a foreign emolument, yeah, this could fit. In terms of a domestic emolument, when you got a lease from the GSA and then fired the head of the GSA who initially told you, you got to divest, otherwise this is going to be a violation of the emoluments clause. Well, that combined to say, well, you're getting a foreign advantage and a domestic advantage. And the ultimate result could be he has to divest fully in the Trump International Hotel. That is a hop, skip, and a jump from the White House, the Treasury Department, and any other interest that would say you are getting an advantage by being the president of the United States.
And if this continues, Gloria, potentially the president might have to release his tax returns,
right,
which has been a very sensitive subject.
You think?
Understatement.
Yeah, through discovery. This is potentially something they'd want to look at. I don't know what it would show, or whether they would get it, or whether I'm assuming Bob Mueller already has what he needs to have from the president's tax returns if he's looking at it. But yeah, I think this is something the president should have foreseen, honestly, that this would be a conflict, and that people stay at the Trump Hotel and international governments stay at the Trump Hotel because they want to curry favor with the president of the United States and his family. I mean, that's just kind of obvious.
And it shouldn't, Gloria's right, it really shouldn't be a surprise to Donald Trump, because remember, he wins, and in the transition process, there's this whole debate about this is someone whose business is not just sort of this one thing, it's putting your name on things, it's very diversified in that way, and people say the only way is to fully cut ties to avoid these sorts of things, and he just refuses to do so. He said, well, Eric and Don, or Don Jr., his son, are running the business. I'm not involved in it. But he doesn't, there's no blind trust. There's no, the sorts of things that people with less complicated finances who have been president in the past have done.
There's been a lot of speculation that those tax returns, Bianna, could show some sort of Russian business dealings.
I mean, who knows, Wolf? As Gloria said, Bob Mueller probably has what he needs from the tax returns. I don't think that you're going to see any Venmo transactions from the Kremlin to Donald Trump and any smoking gun in that fashion. There may be a lot of embarrassing things from a financial standpoint from his past. But I think a lot of this is sort of baked in the cake. And on the one hand, for his supporters, they may be tired of hearing about all of this. On the flip side, the president, who's come across as the world's greatest businessman, may be a bit embarrassed if, in fact, these things start coming out. Which is why you may have seen him. Why this week he specifically said, "Don't believe what you read and hear on the news." Yeah. Maybe gearing up for what could be coming.
Everybody, stick around. There's more we're following, including a new fight among House Republicans over impeaching the Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein, the man who oversees the special counsel Robert Mueller's investigation. Plus, the Trump administration misses today's deadline to reunite separated migrant families. Hundreds of parents still aren't with their children.